Welcome back to Goth Fragrance Dialogues, where scent meets story. Today, I'm honored to be speaking with one of the creative forces behind Curatrix, a distinctive fragrance house guided by art, narrative, and mystery. Kasia, how are you today?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. To begin with, I ask everyone, what is your first memory tied to scent?
Oh my gosh. Okay. My first memory tied to scent is probably a joint one with my sister, Heather. I know you've spoken to her as well too. Um, and it was when we were on the island of Capri as children, and we were running around in these beautiful flower gardens. And I just remember it being so beautiful and fragrant. And then it also happened to be connected to a fragrance company called like the smallest fragrance in the world or the smallest fragrance house in the world. And I can't remember the name right now. Oh, it's called Carthusia. Uh, and we used to run around just in the flower gardens that used to be what became their ingredients for fragrance. Um, didn't really know at the time as children, or like didn't connect it, but that was probably one of my first memories. Is just it was bright, it was beautiful, it was like that perfect temperature weather, and just everything was beautiful colors, and everything smelled so fragrant and fresh, and that's probably my first memory.
Awesome. Speaking about Heather, Curatrix is a really unique creation. It's formed by two sisters, and it's embodied by this kind of mysterious curator. Can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit more about how this identity was born and what that means to the brand and to the both of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my sister Heather and I, we both were really inspired when we went to create the Curatrix line. Looking at the idea as large fragrance creators, the fragrances we tended to gravitate towards were ones that really told stories within them. And so, our idea when we were in this position where like we think we might be able to do this was let's base something around storytelling and make it the entire thing, the whole brand, every collection we bring forward, everything is storytelling. And then it's like you fall in love with the story. And then, by the way, we also have these amazing fragrances made by wonderful perfumers. So the idea is Curatrix is the Latin word for the female curator. And the idea is she's kind of like our figurehead founder, and my sister and I are almost like her minions running around and doing her work for her. We're like her assistants. And she goes around the world. She falls in love with everything about nature, about culture, history, and art, and she brings those things back to her lab and essentially creates stories off of her experiences. And so how we did that is essentially she's a combination of my sister and I. So I really like history, and my sister really loves art, and so we kind of put that together to create kind of like this super perfect additional sister that doesn't really exist, and she's the one that's kind of running the ship.
I love that. Your collection does consist of these kind of cinematic chapters in a film noir landscape. What inspired that visual and emotional direction?
Well, there's a couple things why we started with the film noir collection. The first one is that we thought it was a really cool, what maybe not cool, it was a really interesting time in cinema history. Film noir in what it did and how it had to operate during that time in Hollywood is something that was really profound. It was new to the industry at the time, and it's something that you still kind of see the ripple effects of film noir and its main motifs throughout modern film even today. And so from that perspective, we said that's really cool, and I think that's something we should showcase to the world. And the other more personal kind of point of view to it is when we were younger, our parents used to make us do old movie nights, which we didn't really appreciate as children. But as we got older and went and kind of, kept doing it with our parents, we went through musicals, we went through silent films, we went through, looking at some of the first, Technicolor films and how that was so revolutionary and like the focus on color when, you finally could use it in film. And then we came to film noir, and my dad went down this rabbit hole of Humphrey Bogart, and so we started there, and then it branched out to all sorts of other film noirs, and it became this big thing. And when we were looking at kind of how I guess our childhood, and stemming back to even that fragrance house on the island of Capri, it was like we really love fragrance, we've always loved fragrance. And then we're like, let's tie something back to our childhood as well. And we said film noir. It's something that we have such a positive memory of watching these movies with our parents. And it was something we wanted to bring forward to everybody else as well to enjoy.
That's amazing. I thought it was really interesting because obviously film noir aesthetically resonates with myself as, goth, but I also, my grandmother loved old movies. So growing up watching, Arsenic and Old Lace, or, all of these old films, it already resonated. I knew who these characters were going to be, so I was already part of the story. And I actually have like an original movie poster for Metropolis. It's one of my favorite films of all time. So.
Stop! That's so cool.
So you worked with some really amazing perfumers in this collection. How did you collaborate and ensure the fragrances still felt cohesive under the Curatrix direction?
Well, to be totally honest with you, and to be frank, we didn't know what the hell we were doing, which I think is really some of the fun and the magic that came into it. So what we did, which was totally accidental, and I think it's something we're going to continue because we really, for one, I always really like to point it out, we have a deep amount of respect for the perfumers that are in this industry. To be both left and right-brained at the same time is so it's so incredible. And to know that these are individuals that have taken, years, decades of their lives to study this from, the science and the technical point of view, and then turn around and turn it into essentially wearable art is incredible. So knowing that information, when we started to talk to the fragrance house that we work with, we were like, why would we dictate to these perfumers to say, well, make something like this fragrance but different, or make something with these notes but different, or you have to include this note, and we didn't really want to do that. And our bigger perspective on that was, these are artisans. This idea that our house is based around ultimate creativity and expression and storytelling wouldn't be fully thought out if we then turned around and hindered the artisans that are creating perfume. So what we did was we gave them snippets of kind of the storyline of what we were doing to build out the story. We gave them colors, we gave them like Pinterest boards, music, movie snippets, like all of these little details. And we gave them all of that and just said, if this inspires you, then create around this. So we had no idea what we would originally receive when we would get kind of those first samples back. And we didn't even know which perfumer we were working with additionally. Our fragrance house had some fun with us that they would send us like 3 or 4 formulations per fragrance as what they thought would be the most viable formulations based on what we gave them to work with, which wasn't a lot, I guess. And then we were blind smelling. We weren't told notes. We weren't told the nose behind it. We weren't told anything. And then when we settled on a formulation that we thought was going to fit the story the best, that's when it was revealed who was the nose behind it and what the fragrance notes were. So it was really this cool blind experience. And knowing now, I guess, understanding, kind of talking with more people in the industry, maybe that's not as typical, and it is maybe a little more typical to go, I want notes of rose or dill or something like that. I don't think we're going to change that, because we got some of our best creative work from extremely talented people when we let go of the reins and let them run the show.
Yeah, I mean, I think of how when interviewing Victor from Zoologist, talking to him a little bit about that process, I was like, obviously you have this very strong brand identity and you work with some really prolific perfumers, but how does that match up? And he said sometimes it's a material and sometimes it's just the animal. And, he'll find a perfumer and he'll say, what animal do you want to do?
Yep.
And
I think it's so
give
important.
that creativity back to the perfumer.
Absolutely.
I think my favorite was when he was talking about Anton Lay, who just did Portuguese Man of War. He didn't even really give him a creature. He was like, I want something weirder than Secretions Magnifique.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Just let Anton Lay go for it. And it was really cool because I got to smell Portuguese Man of War like 7 months before it was released because I was there talking with him. And I was like, wow, I get it. I see it. So I do love that aspect where a lot of the folks I talk to are the perfumer. So they are conceptualizing and developing.
Right.
But the creative director role has this really interesting input where you can choose how much control you have. And it sounds like you're relinquishing almost all of it.
Yeah, well, look, it's the concept of, if you're, what I like to say is, if you're asking a painter to paint a masterpiece, but then you don't give them all of the paint and you don't let them have their expression in the art, is it really a masterpiece? And I argue, at least for us and for our brand identity, it didn't make sense to us. These are people that are extremely talented, extremely like we're in awe and deep respect of who they are, what they've accomplished in their careers, and the fact that they found inspiration from our, admittedly vague guidelines and still were able to put together this deep woven story with kind of the very small guardrails we gave them is so incredible and so impressive. And that was really the goal here, is if we're really saying that we're about storytelling, we're about art, and we're about celebrating artists and artisans, it would be almost hypocritical to really give them this narrow runway to work with and say, you're only doing this, and I don't want to hear any of your other ideas. Of course we wanted to hear their ideas. And when we listened to them, that's how we created much better fragrances than really what, Heather and I even hypothesized could have happened, because we'd sit in the back and go, well, I don't know, I think they might go this direction, or maybe they're going to go this direction. And we get something totally left field and we're like, this is even better than what we could have thought. And that's what was so exciting about it.
My next question was actually kind of answered there. It was, do you find fragrance notes and narrative themes coming first, or do you allow the story to emerge? And
totally story.
yeah, it's amazing that you developed the story and then went back and said, what part of this inspires what?
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you an example of a fragrance that we thought was going to go a certain direction, and it went totally just the opposite way than what we thought it could have been, but it was better than we could have thought. So our fragrance Anti-Hero, which is this boozy gourmand, is made by Honorine Blanc, extremely esteemed, one of the few female master perfumers in the world. And it was an honor for her to create something for us. And we thought with the prompts we were providing that, we had imagery and stuff of like dark, shadowy alleyways. We had an idea of this guy being like in a drunken stupor. So we were thinking we were gonna get some kind of like smoky, aromatic type fragrance. And she came with this kind of boozy moment. And it was warm, and it was comforting, and it was joyful, and it felt like it was a much better way to introduce this character, that even though he's kind of a drunk doing the right things for the wrong reasons, that he could still stand there, and we meet him in the moment, in his apex of essentially drunkenness, of where he's still happy, versus finding him already in misery in a dark alleyway. And it was kind of moments like that, especially so early on, because that was, the second fragrance in our line that we were trying to create, that we really, that moment with Honorine really solidified that we were not going to put these guardrails on these perfumers, and that it would, frankly, for us at least, it would be an insult to do so, and we were not going to participate in that. It didn't work with our brand story. I understand with a lot of brands why it is appropriate, just for the record, but for us, we just were like, let's just shoot for the stars and see where we land. And that was way more fun and exciting for us too.
Yeah, conceptually, even the way that you've developed this, I feel like it almost makes the fragrances that much more interesting, that you developed a story and said, please make a fragrance.
Yeah.
And then just got to experience it the same way that everyone else does when they interact with it for the first time.
And that's what was fun, is, and to a degree, I guess, to your point, it really made it feel like we got to experience what it would be as the consumer, as the end user, to go, this is what it's going to feel like. And we go, we like the way this feels, and it feels right for us, and that's why we're going to do it.
It's mind-blowing, but I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
In, the story-driven branding, any brand really with a strong concept, you sit apart from market trends. You sit apart from what's the new hot note in perfume talk. So how do you find staying committed to the Curatrix's artistic vision and interacting with these perfume markets and communities?
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, so for us, it is tricky. We do understand trends. Our fragrance house is continually updating us. We always receive trend reports on what they predict are going to be the up and coming, notes and themes for the upcoming 6 months, year, 2 years. Even I think last year we got something that was showing more of like a 5-year long-term projection for the industry and what they're predicting is going to become the next hot notes. And it's something that really, again, in maybe a terrifying way, we really left that in the hands of the perfumers. For example, with our fragrance Heist, when it was released, last May, so about a year, almost a year and a half ago-ish, it has a top note of cherry. And at the time, I think cherry was just about hitting its apex in the market. And in terms of, I guess I should say, perfume talk, it was everywhere. I think in terms of purchasing behavior, cherry is still incredibly popular and will be for some time. But it was never an intention for us to seek out these up and coming or popular ingredients. And I know that goes against the direct ethos of what a company should do in terms of you should be ahead of these trends. Like we're receiving this information and yet we're not utilizing it, which does seem maybe wasteful on our end. But the idea for us is that trends, again, are kind of guardrails. And our bet essentially with the brand is that our storytelling can overcome even a trend in a way, because the idea for fragrance, right, is we get to tell this cool story and we get to work with perfumers and play around in this hyper creative space. But at the end of the day, when someone's purchasing a fragrance, right, they're taking it home, they're wearing it on a first date, to a job interview, hell, they're wearing it on their wedding day. And I get to become our story gets to become part of someone's most intimate moments in their life. And that's not a trend. That's everyday life. And that's what we're excited about, is how can we become part of people's lives and really just do a little something special with storytelling to really just emphasize how cool and unique and special every single person is. So while it's fantastic to know the trends, to follow the trends, to be a part of the trends, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but storytelling was so deeply ingrained for us that it felt like trends were secondary. It was, we have to tell the story, and we have to make sure that when we tell the story, it resonates with our audience in a way that people want to invite that energy into their lives.
Yeah, I think your point about story overriding trends is really amazing. And to your point, perfume and the concept of it, it's great in the marketing, but when someone actually owns it and they're taking it, like you said, to a job interview, to a first date, it exceeds that story and becomes part of a different story.
Exactly. And I love trends. And the reality is too, at this point, there are so many beautiful fragrance brands out there that have different market segments, different target audiences. And what I love about this industry is there's room for everybody. And there are certain brands that follow more towards, what is the trend and chasing that trend or becoming that trendsetter to start the new wave. And you have to have those companies and those individuals who really lead that in order truly for someone like my sister and I to come in and essentially subvert that narrative and say, we're actually going to go a totally different route and focus on story. But those companies have to exist in order for everyone to kind of play ball with each other. And I think that's something that when you look at the bigger picture of the fragrance industry, it's really, really important. All of us in this industry, we all play an important role together with our different companies, our different price points, our different methods and mantras and inspiration. And again, just, I don't know, I'm sappy, but that's what's so cool about this industry is there's literally space for everybody to sit at this table.
Yeah. And the table is ever expanding.
Yes.
as more people join it.
Yes.
So the fragrance community, especially in the realm of TikTok and Instagram, are really drawn to the dramatic, cinematic creations like Fatal and Cold Blooded. How does the audience reaction shape your future direction, if at all?
So I look a lot at feedback that we receive, obviously through influencers that we work with, through people we send product to, through the store owners we work with when we get feedback on what's selling, what's not, and obviously our own internal data. And in terms of how it might influence us, all it tells me is people like storytelling. And the more we tell stories and find creative ways to express storytelling through fragrance, I think that's at least what our audience is really after. I do obviously hear that one thing in our line that I know we don't have that maybe is an inhibitor to us is we don't have like a true gourmand. We really don't have like a true super strong vanilla kind of moment in the line. And frankly, I don't think it would have been appropriate in film noir. I think it would have felt incredibly forced and would detract from the storytelling. But I know that that's something that, perhaps in the next collection, is something that, we're considering. We have to look at our kind of olfactive mapping and see where do we have potholes and gaps. Because for us, the other part of the brand besides storytelling is to be a unisex line. We do want it to be available that anyone can wear any fragrance. And like what you mentioned with Fatale, that's why we stripped the word femme out of it. And that's why it's just a Fatale. Because who is a Fatale? A Fatale is someone who is dangerous, who marches to the beat of their own drum. And when they enter a room, it's like they have this invisible spotlight that shines on them. All of those descriptors are not gendered descriptors. Anybody could be that. And that's something we additionally wanted to capture. So when we look at certain fragrance profiles and notes, we understand that certain genders, certain audience will lean certain ways towards that fragrance, and we get that. But it should be something that's kind of open and available to just anyone to freely explore the story, the narrative, and all of that. But I do understand that when we look at olfactive mapping, for example, like we do probably need a stronger gourmand. We're going to probably need, I don't know, maybe something more aqueous forward. I know we have 6 Feet Under that has kind of that wet gravestone accord, but it's still really a green fragrance, and we don't really have like a true aquatic in our line. So I understand these potholes, but even as we're developing our, next collection, and even, the collection after that, we're building the story first. And then if we see an opportunity where maybe that's appropriate, we might try and angle some of the photos or inspiration towards the perfumers to maybe try and invoke that. But we're not, I think, ever going to outright say, we want this to be a vanilla, a true gourmand. We want this to be aquatic. We're going to give them the inspiration. And again, we think they're going to come up with the better result than what we could. And we're not trained in this. They are. So why would I sit here and demand of them, something that maybe I just can't figure out technically, how those notes should work together? That's silly of me. So I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, when you mentioned like a gourmand or a real heavy vanilla, I was like, Foreshadow certainly has vanilla, but it's the kind of vanilla that I know I enjoy, which is that kind of dark, broody, musky.
It's aloof, and it's like you could hide in the shadows and just, I don't know, be moody the whole night about it. And it's comforting in the same way. And that's kind of how we played with vanilla, is not in that true, I guess, vanilla punching you in the face type fragrance. And I know eventually we'll have to create some kind of variation on that. And I feel that that's kind of part of when you expand your line. If you stick to the same profile and that's what you like and that's what you're good at, I think that's awesome. But for us, again, it's about exploring all facets of the world and recreating it in fragrance. So to us, to try and force something, if it's not appropriate, feels like it falls short of our brand messaging.
Yeah. I mean, when I think of like people who have mastered gourmands, it's like Theodoro Calatenis. Everything he does is an out of this world gourmand. Some of them resonate, some of them do not for me personally.
but that's the beauty of fragrance.
Right. And anytime someone's like, yeah, I want a gourmand that's not, Sephora related or something, I'm like, check out Theodoro. He's going to have something for you.
Exactly.
So when people say, I want like a moody, weird, dark fragrance, I'm like, oh, Curatrix. It's like, you have a few spotlights and bright points, but you do largely have this noir theme in this first collection.
And we had to. I think, truthfully, again, with the film noir, like if we did have some hyper vanilla gourmand in the film noir line, it wouldn't make sense and it would feel forced. Like I know our toughest fragrance to work with in terms of the storytelling really was actually, I think, Fatale. It was a tie between Fatale, or I'm sorry, not Fatale, apologies, Flashback or Cold Blooded. We had a lot of trouble with both of those. And Flashback is, in film world, a flashback is a very critical part of many movies, and it's a very critical part of film noirs. And really what our biggest concern is because it's supposed to be so nostalgic, so happy, so, romantic, looking at these characters before they were broken, evil, terrible people, we really struggled with, is this going to stand out in the line in a negative way, because the line really is so moody and dark. And Frank Vogel, the way he put Flashback together, I think made it feel really nostalgic, really familiar, and in a way that was beautiful, but not kind of overwhelming the entirety of that collection, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I mean, Cold Blooded is one of my favorites personally. I wore it on an airplane once, which might not have been the right move, but it's another standout. I think they each have a very specific personality that I really appreciate.
Same. And it is kind of like putting on a suit of armor. I feel that with all fragrance. I obviously now I wear my line most of the time, but I still have a very large collection, and so does my sister. And even when I'm not wearing, my fragrance, I still want to, it has to fit the mood. It has to, like, I know a lot of people look at fragrances very seasonally, and for me, they're very emotional. And it's how am I feeling that day, or how do I want to feel? I know something I struggle with is I do like a darker aesthetic personally, and to be a little bit more moody, but I feel that sometimes I'm a faker, and I think that just stems from high school and being bullied and all of that stuff, for being emo and all that good stuff back in the day. But so it's like I feel like when I wear these stronger, more aggressive fragrances, that it's that suit of armor that I need to really solidify that I feel good about myself that day and what I'm wearing, or what I'm going to do. And it sounds silly, but that's at least how I personally view fragrance.
Absolutely. I was just talking with Yosh Han last week, actually. I think her interview will come out right before this one.
Oh, yay.
About resonance and how we often reach for the things that we need. So it's not always this perfume fits my day. It's this is who I need to be today. Curatrix blends kind of the storytelling and the art and the emotion and the scent in a way that is very theatrical. And obviously that has a clear intention. How do you envision the brand growing in this kind of increasingly trend-focused fragrance industry?
Yeah, well, I think for starters, we're going to continue to not disregard trends by any means, but we're going to continue with storytelling. I'm a darn broken record on this one today, but when we're looking at our future up and coming collections and ideas of what my sister and I are developing right now, like we've thought about some ideas that take a total 180 from film noir, which is very dark and moody, to something very, very light, very bright, very uplifting, really just to show the range of the line and really the range of kind of, I guess, our minds and our creativity. And ultimately, of course, Curatrix is her, big creative brain and what she's coming up with too. We've had ideas about creating fragrance lines around architecture, around space, around quite literally the concept of time itself. And because I went down, this was just my personal thing. I had a moment where I started looking at wormholes and dissipation of space and time, and looking at how black holes might actually just be not what we've suspected they are, and looking at quarks and microparticles and stuff, just totally off the wall stuff. And that's kind of what's so cool about the brand is I get to present to my sister, hey, what do you think about an idea of looking at black holes? And she goes, actually, that's a little crazy. Why don't we try maybe this, or why don't we put this on hold till we can develop it more? And she'll come back to me and go, well, I really like, recently I went to an art exhibit and reminded me of this other art painting. What do you think about maybe we try and look at like this time period of art? And I'm like, well, I think maybe, like for one concept we were working on, I was like, I think it's a little too close to film noir. So I don't think we can do it right away, because we might get branded as like kind of like a stuck in a certain time frame for it. So the next collection, we want to essentially be polar opposite of Curatrix, of film noir, not necessarily in terms of like abandoning dark and moody, but like we're not going to approach film, and I don't know if we'll ever approach another film genre again, to be honest. But it's like we're looking at music, we look at imagery, we look at science, and all of that is what's really exciting to us, is that we feel that with the way we've established the brand, is that's how it's going to grow. And even kind of the foundational roots is Curatrix and her olfactive gallery. The idea is every collection we launch is essentially a room in a museum. So while like right now, conceptually with one collection, it's quite difficult to see, but the idea is when we have maybe 3 or 4 collections, what you see is 3 or 4 different rooms, like you're walking through the Met or, just any kind of museum, and you just go to a different room and it's a different time period. And that's kind of the idea with us too, is that you're going to walk through a museum, but it's entirely made out of fragrance.
Astonished by this. I love it. I had kind of positioned it as a brand built around film genres, and I was like, I wonder what genre they're going to do next. But opening it up even further in this aperture of
It's
anything,
everything's on
whatever
the
the
table.
Curatrix is inspired by as
Yeah.
she collects these. I'm
Yeah.
so excited.
The other idea, which I'll let you know because it's a fairly solid idea, though it's not coming out for a while. We have something called Curatrix's Curiosities, which is kind of going to be where we release one-off fragrances instead of a whole line. So it'll be perpetually open. But the idea and concept behind it is kind of like an oddities shelf, you know, with the skulls and the glass jars with the glass bell jars that you can pull up and it's got little trinkets in it. And that's the idea, is these one-off unique fragrances that maybe are foretelling a future collection we're working on, or maybe it's just something that we had this intense fascination with that we just had to bring forward. And that for us is kind of our ultimate kind of sandbox to play around in. And we wanted it to come right after film noir, but we felt that we really need to establish more about, we're not just a film kind of brand, we're going to branch out to other things. So the next collection is really important for us to be, you know, just as detailed, just as story heavy, and also just as different as anything else on the market. And then we think we can play with kind of these one-off ideas after.
Amazing. Looking ahead, are there any stories or eras or themes that are going to be in the next collection that you can reveal to us now? What is the Curatrix working with?
I can't really say, but the one thing I will say that I always have been pretty open about is it takes us a long time to create a collection. The film noir story and the brand itself, the film noir story probably took 1.5 to 2 years to develop before it even was sat in front of a perfumer, really. And then the brand itself took about 1 year or so to develop as well. Just what the brand is going to be, who is the Curatrix, we have a whole Word document about who is she, what is her personality type, what does she enjoy, what does she not enjoy, what does she look for. Like, we have this whole way, so it helps us when we're looking at a new theme to craft it through her eyes. And so right now we're actually creating 2 collections at the same time for the next one. So it's been quite difficult, just like it's very emotionally and creatively taxing. And we're dual creating these 2 collections at the same time. And the idea is, as we kind of tailor it down, we're going to figure out what we're doing with it, but we don't expect whichever one we end up going with that it's going to come out until probably 2027. And again, right now in an industry where everything feels, even just this year, so much more fast-paced than any other year before, we understand that that's difficult for a brand to say we're not going to put anything out for probably 2 years, and we understand how that can be tricky and a bit terrifying. But we feel that with the story and everything we've created, that if we kind of just sent the story that we have right now to perfumers, we'd really be shortchanging the perfumers, the brand, and again, this whole idea of storytelling that we're so adamant about. It just feels like it would be a cop-out, honestly.
I think the people that have resonated with the film noir collection will understand that, because they are present for the story and for that level of detail.
Exactly.
So, and finally, do you have any advice for creators who want to approach perfumery in this kind of storytelling, immersive, emotional way that you have?
Ooh, I think the hardest part of it, and the piece of advice I would give, is you have to be very confident in the story that you want to tell and what you want to share with the world. There will be lots of people who will give you lots of opinions and lots of advice, both good and bad. And you really have to, I guess, kind of like stick to your guns, You have to be honest with yourself about what the end goal is. Our end goal, we wanted to put forward a collection, and we thought it was a great thing as sisters, as a great bonding opportunity for us. And we loved perfume, and we were like, well, this is really cool. We may never be able to do something like this again. And so we kind of, took it and ran with it and said, we're going to try this, even if it fails. And you just have to understand that failure is a real possibility. And that if you're going to follow your inspiration, your storytelling, and your art, it might go against the grain of what is supposed to happen in the industry, what you're supposed to do. And at the end of the day, if your story really is what you think it is, then people will resonate with it and people will believe in that story. And we're incredibly grateful for everybody who believes in our story and wants to share our story. I mean, I'm incredibly grateful that you invited me here to even, again, share the story. It's so humbling and it's so incredible, and it feels so authentic to be able to just say, this is 100% what we wanted to do, and we're proud of the work we did here.
Well, thank you for bringing us all into the story.
Yes.
Can you let the folks who are watching know where to find you online as well as on social media?
Absolutely. So online, our main website is shopcuratrix.com. You can also find us if you want to sample us. We're on Scentbird. We're on Neiman Marcus. This fall holiday season, we're going to be doing some some pop-ups with Bloomingdale's. And all of our socials are at Shop Curatrix, and that's going to be Instagram and TikTok.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh.